Good morning. My name is Ed Luterbach. I have been a member at St. Joan of Arc for 34 years. My wife and I were married here in 1988. We raised 3 kids through St. Joan of Arc's youth program. I've been on the parish council for 6 years, 3 of which I was the chair, and got involved in this church wherever I could. And I can assure you that my family and I have felt welcomed wherever we've been on our journey. Over the past 22 years of attending St. Joan of Arc, one of my favorite Sundays was Arm in Arm in Africa Sunday. I love the pictures, the stories, the emotion, the energy that Father Cassidy and all the delegates came back with. This was the first time that I saw that St. Joan of Arc could impact the world more than just the community around us. On Arm in Arm in Africa, I always thought to myself, one day I want to go on a delegation. Then in 2015, when I was in between jobs, the opportunity arose and I took it. The reality of the trip far exceeded any of my expectations. I saw people with so little be so grateful what they had and so willing to share it with others that had less. I met people that dedicated their lives to this community. I saw a beautiful country with some of the harshest living conditions that I've ever seen. But everywhere we went, we found joy. One of the highlights of my trip was when we went on home visits in Cape Town. A grandmother who was taking care of her 2 kids because they lost both of their parents to the AIDS epidemic, told me that I was the first white man that ever came into her house. She told me how much she appreciated the food parcels. It was a welcome change from a diet of sheep skulls, which is a common street food in the townships. She shared stories of her life experience, and as we left, we embraced in this hug that was one of those hugs that neither one of us wanted to let go. And another really quick story. We were in Melengeti providing food to the rural poor. It was another grandmother that approached with a rickety old wheelbarrow. I didn't know that she was going to make it home, let alone the wheelbarrow make it home. So I offered to help her. Turns out that her house was over 2 miles away from the food distribution point. When we got to her modest house, she invited me in. I helped her in with the food. And I noticed that she was raising chickens on her kitchen floor. So anything that she could do to make ends meet. And for me, it was a new meaning to the phrase, "excuse my mess." My travel to South Africa moved me. So much so that I got involved and joined the board of directors. I've been honored to serve for the past 6 years. Especially during the pandemic, where we're one of few nonprofits that have actually increased the amount of giving that we've provided during the pandemic, and increased funding in food, healthcare, and education, which are the 3 pillars of Arm in Arm in Africa. Food is easy for all of us to understand. If we're hungry all the time, if we're hungry, nothing happens. But here's a great example of how Arm in Arm in Africa was able to tie a solution into education and healthcare. On our delegation trips, we realized that girls weren't going to school during their period. And this was because their families couldn't afford feminine hygiene products. The irony of this is that during the apartheid era, blacks could only it was illegal to get an education past the 4th grade. So now They have the opportunity to get an education, but because of something so human, they stayed home. So Arm in Africa partnered with another nonprofit called Days for Girls, and they provided sustainable menstruation kits for these girls that are now back in school. This work is happening because of all of you. Life during my visit was very, very hard. But imagine their life during the pandemic. There's a lot of talk through this election about inflation. And inflation is not just a U.S. phenomenon, it's a global phenomenon. So imagine that you have cornmeal up 11%, flour up 24%, and cooking oil is up 69%. But the U.S. unemployment is 3.7%. In South Africa, unemployment is 34%. And if you're in the youth that's looking for a job from 15 to 24, the unemployment rate is 63%. So needless to say, our help is still needed. Not only are food costs up, but we have to provide security to make sure that the food gets to the right place. So here's what Arm in Africa has been doing to keep up with the needs in South Africa. In 2021, we spent $220,000 in programming support. For 70% of that was food, the remaining 30% was split between healthcare and education. Our programming budget in 2022 is $300,000. We've grown to a point that we've needed to hire a half-time executive director, which is Pat Dawson, and he does an amazing job, and Dave Horseman, a financial controller for the organization. We support this budget with 2 fundraisers, one in the summer, and then a fall campaign that's kicked off with Arm in Africa and goes through the rest of the year. We are now in the process of taking Arm in Africa to the next level. And there's a few things that we need to do to do that. We need to sustain and grow. Sustain our current level of programming. We can't afford to go backwards. And we spent a lot of time building an internal organization and architecture that can help this organization grow because the need is there. The tricky part is we need to accomplish both of those objectives and reduce our dependence on the 2 fundraisers. In order to accomplish these objectives, Arm in Africa started the Arm in Africa Legacy Giving Program. And this is where all of you come in. And our ask is pretty simple. The first thing that we need is for everybody to contribute what you've been doing on an annual basis. Our goal for this year's fall campaign is $182,000. This is exactly what the contributions were last year at this time. The second thing is we'd like you to consider including Arm in Africa in your estate plan. If you have a trust or a will, please think about including Arm in Africa as one of your beneficiaries. I can't think of a better legacy than to know that you're providing life-saving support at an end-of-life event. And the third is we'd like you to consider to contribute to Arm in Africa's endowment program. For those of you that don't know what an endowment is, think of it as a savings account that the interest earned from that savings account can go toward programming dollars. So if you have additional resources, this is a great way to give a gift that keeps on giving. The endowment is managed by a third party, and we can only use the interest that's earned on this. Our goal is to reach $5 million in the endowment. That would give us $200,000 a year of interest earned to put toward programming dollars. Now, this might sound like a really big goal, but we started the endowment a short time ago, and we already have over $575,000 of contributions. So if you have any questions about the endowment or the legacy giving program, we will be in the Welcome Center at the end of Mass. With that in mind, I want to say thank you for all of your continued support for the past 22 years. I'm also excited that I will be going on this next trip, so this will be the first one post-pandemic. And for those of you out there that were like me, that sat out there saying, one day I'm going to take this trip to South Africa, go for it. Don't wait. It will change you and ground you in so many ways. Thank you.